Kia ora, Aotearoa. Welcome whānau to the War on News, your weekly sacred cow slaughtering assault on current affairs, being live from the palatial Stratus News bunker buried deep beneath the heart of the Greyland Republic. If this show was a future audience, they would all wonder at how stupid we were to think cell phones didn't cause cancer the way we currently view how stupid people of the past were to think smoking didn't cause cancer. Remember, smoking your cell phone will almost certainly cause cancer. And tonight's political media crimes against reason kill zone, John Key cripples welfare state with a cheeky grin and a sparkle in his eye. The New Zealand Herald Digipol can officially kiss my ass. A convicted criminal, government pollster and a corporate political mercenary all walk into a bar. No, it's not a joke. It's the right wing planning to attack MMP. Plus this week's Sex and the Super City, Wanko of the Week and the Barack Obama People's Hero of the Week Award. Leading the War on News this week, brothers and sisters, ACT MP Hilary Calvert has admitted to using her own eyes in a large poster promoting one of the brothels she owns. Now, I've never gone to a prostitute before in my life, so I have to acknowledge I'm not the target market for Hilary's poster, but I'm not sure her come hither look is the kind of milkshake one needs to bring all the boys from the yard. Now, while low-tax deregulation Milton Friedman free market dogma certainly fucks you while you pay for it, Hilary's Medusa-like glare seems to snap shut my wallet and kill off any sexual arousal all at the same time. She's like the anti-Viagra. Perhaps she needs to approach Wellington with a new advertising proposal. Brothers and sisters, according to the business community, raising the minimum wage will unleash the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse upon our economy. That's right. Plans by Labour to raise the minimum amount of money for the poorest workers in New Zealand will, according to John Key and the business community, be followed by a plague of locusts, rivers running red with blood, and scorpions falling from the sky with the faces of humans. 6,000 jobs would go, the Prime Minister screamed, which wasn't actually true, as the ill-defined report cited by the business community actually said they thought it could, maybe, theoretically, impact between 4,280 to 5,710 jobs, not 6,000. And the veracity of that report has been totally undermined by researching the impact of raising our youth wage in 2007, which showed no robust evidence of adverse effects on youth employment or hours worked. In short, the business community lied through their teeth. Not so much the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, more the bloke who gives the horses carrots on the weekend. Raising our minimum wage would allow us to take us a step closer to our little brother holy grail of catching up with Australia. The difference isn't tax, the difference is that they pay people much more, and we will never be able to match that and attract people here if we don't move in that direction. How come we only ever try and match the Australian tax rate and not the pay rate? Brothers and sisters, well. So National are privatising ACC now. A system that has been held up as an example around the world has finally fallen to the privatisation agenda of the National Party after Nick Smith's manufactured crisis at ACC has finally worked. This alongside crippling the welfare state, kneecapping the public service, flogging off our state assets, wholesale dismantling of democratic oversight, converting our legal system into a conveyor belt of pet food grade cheap justice, rolling back more legal protections than any other government in recent political history, signing away our economic sovereignty with a draconian free trade deal with America, privatising our prisons so there is a profit motive in locking New Zealanders up, and expanding vast new powers to the police to spy on us without judicial oversight. All of this is sold as moderate centre-right. Whānau, if this is moderate centre-right, what the hell will Dom Brash do as finance minister if a Brash Key government win? FIFA is more credible on corruption than this government are when pretending this economic Darwinism is moderate. To the headlines, whānau. Why are the media talking about John Key's son planking on the Herald front page and not the crippling of the welfare state? You can just imagine the press conference, can't you? Hi all. Having a good day? I had a sausage for lunch. It was yum. Now I'm afraid we're going to have to fuck the poor, the sick and the mentally unwell and the solo mothers up by forcing them all back to work in a 6% plus unemployment labour force because our raising GST to subsidise a tax cut for our rich mates didn't turbocharge the economy like we said, and in fact left $1 billion deficit in revenue we need to fill with the hopes, dreams and aspirations of an entire class of New Zealanders. Here's a picture of my son planking. Can we expect Key to leak pics he's taken of his penis when National announced full state assets privatisation? Crosby and Texter, you heard sleepy hobbits like no one else. And a tactic that National have used again and again and again. The ideologically stacked welfare raiser gang gave the government the radical policy they needed and managed to add an element so fascist that it made Genghis Khan wince with their back to work after 14 weeks for a second child, which allowed John Key to reject it, creating the perception that he's moderated what is still a radical attack on society's most vulnerable and weak. National did it with the mining of conservation land. They put up Great Barrier when they never had any intention of mining Great Barrier, so they could remove it from the list to make them look like they'd listened and create the perception of moderation. Key had the audacity to describe the forcing of mothers back after 14 weeks as making him queasy, which is funny because his comments that poor people who take food parcels are to blame for their own poverty, alongside his claim that if he cut welfare to all beneficiaries then bugger all would starve, made me feel pretty queasy too. National's tactic of proposing 100% crazy and selling 80% crazy as compromise is like getting the National Front to write immigration policy and then look aghast at what they come up with while implementing most of it. Why should the most vulnerable, the solo mums, the sick, the mentally unwell, the disabled, why should they be forced to do with less because of an economic global crisis caused by corporate greed they had no hand in making? How many solo mothers were on the phone to their Wall Street stockbrokers in 2007 buying light crude in euros while speculating on Goldman Sachs derivatives markets? In the words of Scribe, not many, if any. If this government's economic turbocharged incompetence that has led to the crippling of the welfare state by creating $1 billion deficit in revenue because of the rise in GST, this incompetence is aided by John Key's out-of-touch bubble world millionaire lifestyle, which concludes for him that poor people needing food parcels choose to be poor, and that if he cut benefits, bugger all beneficiaries would starve. Whānau, this is just Benny bashing counterproductive bullshit. It's feral raw meat for rednecks dressed up as social policy. We are the 7th most unequal country on the planet in terms of the gap between the rich and the poor. Yet here we are going to bash the weakest members by cutting their benefits if they don't find work in a 6+% unemployment market. We are going to force 100,000 solo mums, sick, disabled and mentally unwell back to work or else. What kind of stress is that going to put on our weakest and most vulnerable? Whānau, all stick and no play makes little Woodamoo a prison statistic. Moving on with the headlines, Whānau. The latest Herald Digi poll is out proclaiming that National has 10 billion% support. Again, blah, 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 blah. The New Zealand Herald has become the most biased news media outlet in New Zealand. 3 anti-Hone editorials in 2 weeks is unprecedented, and their decision to appoint online mouthpiece for the government David Farrar as their online political commentator makes the New Zealand Herald as fair and balanced as Fox News. David polls on Friday, collates over the weekend so he can present the information to caucus on the Tuesday. He has nothing to add other than massaged message points he self-tests on the National Party Research Unit. This is the exact same Herald Digi poll that breathlessly informed us that John Banks and Len Brown were neck and neck. How did that election go down? Oh yeah, it was a landslide to Len Brown. These cheap telephone brain fart polls are missing vast chunks of the electorate as the recession has made the poor more and more difficult to measure. Harold Camping is better at predicting raptures than the New Zealand Herald is at predicting public opinion. Moving on with the headlines, Whānau. The New Zealand Herald has appointed government pollster, propagandist and online National Party mouthpiece David Farrar as their weekly online political commentator, minus any right of return from any number of left-wing bloggers, and this despite the shocking revelations that he, Cameron Slater, and the man behind the corporate coup taking over ACT Party by Don Brash, Simon Lusk, are preparing a smear campaign to attack MMP in the hopes First Past the Post can be re-implemented to ensure hard right government from now on back in New Zealand. Dumping MMP helps straight, white, rich old men take power in this country, and I just don't think they need any more help than they're currently getting. MMP allows our diverse country to have better representation, and that provides for a better democracy. The whinging old white man voice you get croaking on about how evil MMP is seems more a cultural backlash against being forced to share power with other cultures, genders, ages and sexual orientations. Remember, MMP has only been around for a decade. In the bad old days of First Past the Post, Parliament was a rich, white, straight old boys club, and white men saw themselves as the essence of power. Being forced to share that power has caused a cultural backlash by that group towards all the perceived evils of MMP. Farrar, Slater and Lusk want to drag New Zealand back into the dark ages, and the mainstream media, by constantly providing them unchallenged platforms, is playing along with that agenda. I'm not saying that Farrar should be stood down. I'm saying that if you're going to appoint him, they have to get someone from the left with a counter opinion. You want to listen to Farrar? Knock yourself out. But the mainstream media have to appoint a counter perspective in an election as ideological as this one. Everyone keeps shouting that there is no opposition in this country. How can we hear the opposition if the government's pollster gets the only position? Add the opposite view. It's not like there aren't some well thought out counter perspectives, and I'm sure David rates looking moderate and balanced above all else, so he will welcome the space shared. Then there would be balance for citizens to make up their mind. You know, the way it's supposed to work in a democracy aided by an active critical fourth estate. Why should a convicted criminal, a government pollster and a corporate political mercenary get to smear MMP and decide for the country how we elect our politicians? And why should we put up with an unbalanced mainstream media allowing them to do it? Whānau, are you feeling sexy? It's Sex in the Super City time. Let's get this straight. When Rodney Hyde and National were ramming the Super City through with as little oversight as possible, and they told us the cost of IT would be $126 million, and we all said, hold on, that sounds real suspicious. Shouldn't we slow down and check that amount? And Rodney Hyde and National rammed it through anyway. Remember that? Yeah, well, it turns out the IT for the Super City won't cost the $126 million National and Rodney promised. It will, in fact, cost $576 million. Now, the cynic in me says Rodney Hyde and the National Party hid that cost so they could all bleat in unison about the supposed savings the Super City amalgamation would create. The really, really cynical part of me thinks Hyde is a shape-shifting lizard man wearing a synthetic latex human suit. Hyde and National claim they meant the $126 million would be only for 2 years, but nowhere was there a mention in any of their previous discussions that the IT budget was for only 2 years. If this mess hadn't been rushed through, we wouldn't be getting blindsided. Again. Whānau, let's hand out this week's Wanko of the Week award. Brothers and sisters, this week's Wank of the Week has to go to Paul Quinn, not for what he misheard, but for what he did. National Party bootlicker Paul Quinn was accused last week of blaming drunk women for rape on TVNZ7's only worthwhile show, Backbenchers, when a question he misheard led him to give an answer insinuating drunk women were somehow responsible for being vulnerable. If we want to rip this despicable right-wing hardliner to pieces, let's attack him for what he does, not what he misheard. So, what has he done? This right-wing maggot has personally set New Zealand human rights back a century by pushing his private members bill through to strip prisoners serving less than 3 years their human right to vote. A move that puts us at odds with most of the developed world and offside with EU human rights. Bill English described the hard-on-crime crap that Paul Quinn revels like a pig in shit over as a moral and fiscal failure in last week's budget notes. This utterly spiteful law Quinn has has pushed to deny prisoners their right to vote is the final nail in the coffin to alienate prisoners even further from the franchise of democracy and serves no other master than hate. The very hate that Bill has described as a moral and fiscal failure. Far now, let's attack Quinn for the hateful shit he does, not what he misheard. Let's end the show by handing out this week's Barack Obama People's Hero of the Week award. Brothers and sisters, this week's Barack Obama People's Hero of the Week award has to go to the British, after it turns out that they have been training Saudi Arabia's elite security force, the very same elite security force that the Saudis sent into Bahrain to repressively put down democracy protests. On the one hand, the British are supporting the Arab Spring at the G8, and on the other hand, they are training forces being used to violently suppress the Arab Spring. This is hypocritical dyslexia masquerading as foreign policy. That's it for tonight, folks. Don't forget Citizen A plays Friday, 7:30 p.m, Freeview 21 and Sky 89. Follow me on my Citizen Bomber Twitter and Facebook site. It has all the shows posted up online and allows you to befriend other like-minded citizens for romantic news moments. Good night, New Zealand. You stay classy, Aotearoa. Righto.